Emina 85 na legislature in Guam is back from recess. When we last left before lunch, we had an amendment to the main amendment that was withdrawn. So I will recognize the main author of the amendment, Senator Minority Leader Chadwick, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to withdraw my amendment to the bill.
Just made that amendment. On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Minority Leader, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I proffer another amendment, which is on line 4, page 1, and I believe our colleagues have a copy that was delivered on their desk. And if I may speak on it, it is section 61545, penalty A, any person or business who violates any provisions of 61541 or 61544 of this chapter shall pay a penalty not to exceed $1,000 for each violation occurring in residential and agriculture zones, and a civil penalty of $1,000 for a violation occurring for each violation occurring in commercial and industrial zone. If a violation is not rectified within 10 business days of receipt of a notice of violation from the Department of Public Works, any person or business in violation of 61541 and 61544 of this chapter shall be subject to late action civil penalties not to, and then continuing on. And Madam Speaker, like what was mentioned earlier, there was conversation regarding the concern of residential and agricultural zones. And it was quite surprising that many people who own homes didn't realize some of the laws that, or the signage laws that are currently on the books, that some of them are not even yourself, Madam Speaker, didn't even know of. So it's not an excuse, Madam Speaker. Everyone who owns a home should know exactly what the laws are, and it's definitely something that I think the public should be aware of, and if they're not sure, to go to DPW and find out what those rules and regulations are. So that being said, Madam Speaker, I'd like to proffer this amendment and ask for the support of my colleagues.
Thank you, Minority Leader. On the Senator Chadwick amendment, anyone wishing to speak on the amendment? Anyone wishing to speak? Are there any objections? Are there any objections? If not, motion carries. Minority Leader, you still have the floor on the main bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That's all the amendments I have right now.
Thank you, Minority Leader. On the main motion on Bill number 141-35 COR, are there anyone wishing to speak on the main motion? On the main motion, colleagues, we are on the main motion on the question of Bill number 141-35 COR. So on the main question, Assistant Majority Leader, Senator Taitano, you are recognized. Please proceed.
Sujus Masi, Madam Speaker. So with these, the amendment that was proffered, that I thank the author for the collaboration between myself and some other senators, so that a variety of concerns or issues were addressed for the better of the community, I think. So going along with that, the second part of that would be to have the amendment and We just came back from recess, so I'll ask and make sure that this is passed to everybody. And while it's being passed to everybody, I'll go ahead and explain the reasons for the amendment. Is it the shorter one? We shortened it for legal advice.
Please proceed, Senator Taitano.
Sujus Masi, Madam Speaker. So as mentioned before, in the public hearing, different issues had come up. Some of them address these sort of issues about, at least for those in the residential and the agricultural areas, being concerned about having a graduated scale, or at least having DPW be able to weigh in on having a graduated scale so that smaller violations, larger violations, and so forth could be duly considered. And whether it is a family residence, whether it's a church, whether it's a school, and it's just a directional sign, that those could be given due consideration. So in talking with the author of the bill, we came to the previous amendment and this amendment to go alongside it. So it provides a little bit of time for thoughtfulness by DPW to develop a fee and fine schedule or a graduated schedule to be able to think each of these situations through in a thoughtful manner. And I'll read the amendment as it comes to me. I think I'm still waiting for it to come to me.
On the amendment,
So the amendment itself is on page 2, line 20, to add a new subsection, section 61545C, and for the bill to read C. The building official shall implement a penalty fee schedule on a scale that commensurates with the seriousness of the sign violation. Such penalty fee schedule shall be subject to 5 GCA Chapter 9. And that additionally allows for the different processes in the government to take place to make sure that everything is duly considered and it's given its due review before full implementation. Sujus Maasi, Madam Speaker, for letting me introduce this amendment.
thank you, Senator Taitano. On the Taitano amendment, anyone wishing to speak? Senator Joseph Augustine, I will recognize you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Line 20, page 2. I'm trying to understand the scale that commensurate with the seriousness of the sign violation. You know, the author of the bill was very specific, and I agree with her statement. And I understand the author of the amendment when she said that if you get a speeding ticket, it's progressive. No, the only progressive part is the amount that you pay in penalty. When you get pulled over for speeding, there is a fee you pay for speeding, period. Now the amount will increase based on the speed above the speed limit. That's the only progressive part. And I'm trying to understand, how do you commensurate with the seriousness of the sign? If you got a sign violation, you got a sign violation. Now the amount may not exceed 1,000 or whatever. I can understand that. And when it deals with residential, a nonprofit, I can understand that. But I'm just, maybe the author can explain a little bit better, because I'm trying to understand a penalty fee schedule on a scale. If you have a sign violation, you have a sign violation. If you're in a residential area, like the law currently states, nonprofit and residential people. It's a very good example. If I put up a sign saying there's a birthday down the street, not to exceed $1,000, I don't need a building permit. I don't need a permit to put a sign up. I can see that of a commercial. You know that's an industry. They understand that if you're going to put up a sign, if you commit a violation, then so be it. But I'm just trying to understand the word commensurate with the sign. Violation is a violation. It shouldn't be that hard to figure that out. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I'm going to take that as an inquiry, Senator Joe. Senator Taitano, would you like to respond to his inquiry?
Again, I do want to respond. I do yield to the question. I just want to look one more time at the amendment that was just substituted to make sure that everything is aligned. So if I could just have a minute to look at that amendment.
We're in a moment's recess. Pensado y Mina 35 na legislatura in Guam is back from recess. Senator March Tachno, on the inquiry by Senator Joe San Augustine, would you like to respond?
Hungin, most always, if not always, I think it's good to provide information and shed light where one can. So I do yield to the question. So with this, in the way that it is written in 21 GCA concerning the zoning law and the amendment that was just proffered and the discussion amongst several of us senators, it was important. We have differentiated residential and agricultural zones to a degree, so that language now says not to exceed $1,000. And this is specifically because commercial enterprises, they do get permits. They should be aware, as they're getting their permit, of what the rules and regulations are. For residential and agricultural zones, there may be different situations where in order to put up a nameplate, let's say, or a number plate on one's house, a residential area, there is no permit that one has to get. So one does not go through that formal process of having to fill out a form, go through a process, needing to take the time to go through the law. I would hazard a guess to say that most of us on Guam do not casually stroll through 21 GCA, and most of us perhaps do not know that there actually is a size requirement for our residential signs. So that was one of the ones that we especially were concerned with, that somebody who perhaps had slightly over 3 square feet for their residential sign, they had a very large number, perhaps for their house address on their house, that $1,000 penalty immediately seemed rather harsh. And so amongst all of us 3 senators, we agreed that in these instances, certainly DPW could look at standard practices across the United States, model sign laws or model situations, and come to an assessment of what seemed reasonable. So when we use the language commensurates with the seriousness of the sign violation, surely there's a difference that most people would agree to a residential owner, potentially, hypothetically, that has a slightly larger than 3 square foot sign denoting the family name or the number of the house in the street on their residence, versus a commercial enterprise that is set to conduct business. They are supposed to be well-versed and well-informed about the business that they conduct. So that is why several of us senators agreed that it made sense to create these 2 different categories, one for residential and agricultural, which also accommodates churches, nonprofits, and directional signs for them and so forth, versus a commercial enterprise, which is a whole different type of an enterprise or situation on Guam.
Senator Joe San Augustine, does that, okay. Thank you very much. Minority Leader Senator Tairiku, you are recognized on the Taitsino amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand in full support of the amendment. However, I just want to make one slight change here, just a strikeout of fee on where it says the building official shall implement a penalty fee schedule, strike out fee, and just a penalty schedule. The reason why a fee is a service. So I spoke with the author and agreed that it is a service type thing. So, and we also checked with the Guam, like another situation that's similar to this, and it definitely doesn't have fee in there. It usually has fine, but we're good with a penalty schedule on a scale that commemorates.
On the motion to amend the Taitsino amendment to delete the word fee, anyone wishing to speak? Are there any objections? Hearing none. Motion carried. On the title amendment as amended, anyone on that motion? If not, would you like to close? Are there any objections? Hearing none. Motion carries. On the main motion, anyone else? Senator Regine Biscoli, I will recognize you right on the
Sujusmasi,
main motion.
Madam Speaker, with the amendments that have passed, previous amendments by my colleagues, we have implemented a set of violations, fees for violations. So, depending upon whether you are in a commercial zone or in a residential or agricultural zone, those fees vary. But one of the things that kind of came to mind is if a violation, there's a penalty for a potential violation and that's served to me by DPW, it's unclear about how I, as a business owner, or I, as a resident, go about appealing any of these notices of violation. And so I just wanted to be very clear, and to that end, my amendment is to add a new subsection C to section 61545, and this is on page 1, line 9. And the new subsection would read, any person or business within 10 working days of a receipt of notice of violation may file an appeal of the findings of violation. The Guam Land Use Commission shall hear and decide appeals relative to any penalty imposed pursuant to this section. The payment of any penalty shall be stayed during appeals. The Guam Land Use Commission shall promulgate rules and regulations in compliance with the Administrative Adjudication Law 5 GCA Chapter 9 to implement the appeals process relative to this section within 90 days of the enactment of this act. Madam Speaker, it is my understanding that GLUC handles these appeals currently for occupancy permits, for variances, and to avoid confusion, we want to just be explicit and allow them to implement the appeals process for signs as well. Sujusmasi.
Senator from Tamuning, if I may, if you can just ask the motion to change that from C, I think would be D because of the previous amendment, or ask legal counsel to.
So included in my amendment is just an opportunity to have legal make technical corrections to the amendment.
On
Sujusmasi.
that second motion, without any objection, motion carries. On the Biscoli amendment, Senator Castro, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to rise in support of the intent of the amendment. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak on the Senator Biscoli amendment? If not, I just want to ask a moment's recess, Senator Lee. Emilio 85 in the legislature in Guam is back from recess. To Senator Regine Bisco Lee, thank you for the recess. I want to ask my colleagues, are there anyone wishing to speak on this amendment? If not, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Lee, you still have the floor on the main motion. Anyone else wishing to speak on the question of Bill 141-35 COR, 35 COR? On the main motion. Anyone else? Senator Joseph Augustine, I will recognize you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just have a question maybe to the author of the bill. Page 2, creating the Public Sign Enforcement Fund. And the only reason I'm asking that question is because currently this government has many funds. And many funds that are not even bringing in enough money to keep the fund worthy of keeping open. We're the Office of Finance and Budget and the Department of Administration and BBMR, we're looking at all these funds that exist that don't generate enough money. And I understand why the author introduced this, because it's to support the enforcement of signs violations. But I'm just concerned that I hope that if this bill passes, that the Department of Administration doesn't make the same mistake they made on the ABC cards, where they didn't open up the account. Because when you pay into for any of these fines or whatever, the Treasurer of Guam is supposed to, or Department of Administration is supposed to establish the account that it goes into. And when a fine is imposed on any industry, they're supposed to know the account number, so when they go and they pay it, it in fact goes into the fund. Otherwise, it will do exactly what this bill is trying to do, not commingle funds. So I thought I'd ask the author of the bill if there's some mechanism in place to make sure it goes in the right direction. Because I do support the bill's intent.
Minority Leader, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I greatly appreciate the comments from my previous, by the previous speaker. And it's true, there are quite a bit of accounts out there that actually some are been dormant for a long time. And in fact, I introduced legislation last year that would help at the request of the public auditor to get some of those accounts off the books. And we came up with, I think, about 28 of them off the books. They weren't being utilized. But I think this account that's created here, and it is, again, for the enforcement of this signage law. And like many things that we put out there and create laws, there's no enforcement behind it. And why is that? Because there's no funding. So we are creating a mechanism to fund this type of enforcement. And as far as a mechanism in place, it creates the Public Signage Enforcement Fund, shall not be commingled with the government. And when it comes time to appropriate this money that's been collected to DBW, then that's what's going to happen. In fact, I think we had a public hearing this morning on just that with the Guam, the GCC. So if there's anything else that I can help to make this happen, an amendment or anything like that, then I'm open to that.
Sito Esmasi, Senator San Augustine, just for the record, based on the committee report, I also want to note that that account has $27,000 in it, based on the fiscal note.
Yes, and we need to remind ourselves, Madam Speaker, is that at the budget hearing, I don't remember hearing Public Works ever saying, Senators, we need money for sign enforcement. Senators, we can't do what we're getting paid. There's people in that office. And I think the budget hearing is coming up. My folks are taking note to ask that question and to make sure that we appropriate the money so they can do their job and not make the excuse they don't have enough people. There are folks in that office. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Si Masi, Senator San Augustine. On the main motion, Senator Will Castro, I will recognize you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the bill as amended. I had a slight sidebar with the prime author of the legislation, stating my initial reluctance. I do see eye to eye with the senator in that there's definitely a need for stronger penalties for those violators or violations that are egregious, especially when there isn't any real demonstrated effort, good faith effort for corrective action. But there were certain assumptions that most of these commercial operators are heavily capitalized, and certain assumptions that they can even meet the fine, the penalty. I saw it as overly restrictive and absolute. But I felt it necessary to rise because the two recent amendments as proffered and passed by Senator Lee and I think another one by Senator Taitano, I felt gave ample opportunity for appeal and sufficient redress. So with that stated, Madam Speaker, I'd like to rise in support of the bill as amended. I thank the prime author and my colleagues for proffering those amendments. Thank you.
Si Masi, Senator Castro. Anyone else on the main question? If there's no one wishing to speak, Minority Leader, you can close.
Seduce Masi, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleagues for their input to make this stronger. I feel that this is going to actually prompt another piece of legislation down the line to ensure regarding the digital signs to kind of mirror this. So I will be introducing a bill that would also address this because we tried to address it here, but there might be some being ingermane, so we're going to do it later on. But before I end my closing, and I'd like to thank Senator Sabina Paris for her insight on the residential and agricultural side, and that she was a co-author of that amendment that we proffered earlier, and I just wanted to bring recognition to that. And so then, Madam Speaker, I would like to move that the Bill 141-35 COR be moved to the third reading file.
On that motion to move 141-35 COR to the third reading voting file, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Therese Chalayi, you are recognized on Bill number 173-35 COR.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to ask that Bill 173-35 be passed on file. I'm still working on an amendment to it, Madam Speaker.
On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. Vice Speaker Nelson, could you please approach the podium?
Speaker Barnes, you are recognized.
Si Jules Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill number 177-35 COR as introduced by myself to the third reading found. I'd like to speak on it, and if I may,
Please proceed.
thank you. Madam Speaker, si Jules Masi Tatlu, Bill number 177-35 COR as introduced is an act to repeal Section 5 of Public Law number 33-186 and Article 6, Chapter 8, Title 4 of the Guam Code annotated relative to the Guam Retirement Security Plan, which is the GRSP plan. Onto this bill, Madam Speaker, was introduced following the transmittal of the Government of Guam Retirement Fund Resolution number 2019-01, and this was done on June 7, 2019. In the resolution, Madam Speaker, the Government of Guam Retirement Fund states that the Guam Retirement Security Plan was created through the Public Law 33-186. An implementation of the plan was subject to legislation to comply with the Internal Revenue Code requirements for governmental pension plans under the 401A of the United States Internal Revenue Code. Number two, the decision and order in the Bautista versus Paris civil case number 1848, filed on February 18, 2003, which is the La Morena order. Without the legislation, Madam Speaker, the implementation would violate the U.S. IRS code and the La Morena order. I want to say that the defined contribution retirement system, which is the DCRS plan, has been the default plan, and to the GRSP was properly implemented, and the general fund appropriation has been insufficient and an unreliable funding source to support the program. Additionally, only 6 persons elected to participate in the GRSP plan. The cost to administer the program for 6 participants only, Madam Speaker, will be too costly. So due to the reasons, the Government of Guam Retirement Fund found that it would be in the best interest to repeal this Guam Retirement Security Plan retroactively in favor of the defined contribution retirement system. And Madam Speaker, before I close on this, I want to say that during the public hearing, it was noted and asked if there was a fiscal note, and if retirement had mentioned what the impact would be, and as noted, it was 6 participants. They did send something, and I'd like to append it to the journal. I really thought our committee submitted the documents, but if I may, it should. I'm asking that that be appended to this bill or to the journal here. The letter that came in from the executive director from the Guam Retirement Office. If I can have a moment's recess, because I want to make sure that that gets appended, because the question was asked during the public hearing about the comments from the Retirement's Office. And Ms. Paula did send a request after the an answer after the public hearing, so I'd like it to be amended.
So you'd like to insert that into the committee
To
report?
the committee report, yes, ma'am.
Okay, we'll take a quick recess.
Yeah.
We're back from recess. Speaker Barnes, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for that moment's recess. I want to apologize to my body. I did get information from the executive director of the retirement plan, but it was for documentation for a bill that's coming up in this session. But I do want to say that based on the information that was provided by the executive director, the program has been in pause, and the 6 applicants that have who signed up for the program are still in the DCRS program. So I'm hoping that we can work on this measure that the Government of Guam Retirement Board has asked us to see, and to make sure that we repeal the actions that was previously done. So I hope that my colleagues will support those efforts, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Sai Namasi.
Ms. Masi, Madam Speaker. On Bill number 177-35, is there anyone that would like to speak? Senator Parrish, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just have a point of inquiry regarding the 6 participants of the GSRP plan. In looking at the Board of Trustees resolution, it looks like they are looking to transfer them to the defined contribution plan. Just want to know what the status is of that. Have they completely transitioned to that?
Speaker Barnes, do you yield?
Yes, Sidzu Masi, and thank you again to the good senator from Barragata. I do want to share with you, as previously noted, that those 6 applicants that signed up for it, there was a pause to determine the impact, and because of that, they were still in the DCRS plan. So that's where they're at right now.
Senator Parrish, would you like to clarify your question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. So just for my own understanding, does that mean that there's no impact to these 6 people, if that's the case, if they haven't signed up for, or they haven't received benefits from this plan? That means there will be no impacts if we repeal this?
Speaker Barnes, do you yield?
Yes. So as noted, Madam Speaker, if I may, based on the information that was provided, that program was in pause, so it wasn't truly implemented, but it's still in the books, and that's why the repeal needs to be done. So because of the pause, those 6 applicants are still in the DCRS plan.
Senator Parrish, does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on Bill number 177? No? Speaker Barnes, you're welcome to close.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. I'd like to move Bill 177-35 COR to the 3rd reading voting file. Sinamasi.
There has been a motion to move Bill 177-35 into the 3rd reading voting file. Are there any objections? No objections. Motion carries.
Colleagues, we are now on bill number 182-35. I will recognize Senator P.2 at this time.
Undang Clunas Jesus Mase, Madam Speaker. Bill number 182-35 COR, introduced by myself, Tina Rose Munya Barnes, and William M. Castro. An act to add a new section 90.41 to Chapter 90 of Title 9 Guam Code annotated relative to creating an inmate commissary at the Department of Correction. Madam Speaker,
Senator.
before I move it to the third reading file, let me just state some of the supporting intent and the conclusion of some of the things that I wanted to say regarding this particular bill.
So,
I have to move it?
yeah.
Do I have to move it now?
Move it to the third reading so you
Okay.
can discuss.
Madam Speaker, I want to move this bill number 182-35 COR to the third reading file.
And you want to speak. Please proceed.
And here's some of my supporting highlights and intent of this, the conclusion of this particular bill. A commissary is a store within the Department of Correction facility where inmates can purchase hygiene items, snacks, written instruments, etc. Inmates will make purchase to an account or will make purchases to an account with funds from money contributed by the family, friends, and earned wages. And I have another, from 1993, 2015, DOC had a commissary. However, because of the vendor issues and legal concerns, DOC closed the commissary and allowed family members to drop off items for inmates on a weekly basis. The inspection of these items have proved to be labor-intensive, and contraband has been known to slip into the DOC through these items. The reestablishment of a commissary will decrease contraband into the prison, allow staff to concentrate on inmates instead of packaging inspection, reduce the stress of inmate families from searching for items that fit DOC specification. And the commissary are a normal part of prison operation in practically all the jurisdiction in the United States. And Madam Speaker, BBMR fiscal note says that the commissary will not cost the governor of Guam any money at all. And also, I have spoken to the acting director of DOC, Mr. Sisaki, and is in full support of this of bill number 182-35 COR. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator P.2. On the main motion, anyone wishing to speak in support? Senator Teresa Lai, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill. I'm not that familiar with this concept, but we were assured at the public hearing and again by the new director at the prison that they are in favor of this bill, and more importantly, that they believe that it will decrease the contraband that is entering into the prison and that they will be able to redistribute the workload of their staff more effectively, where instead of searching all the visitors that are coming in and bringing things in, they will simply have to search the vendor at their discretion. And it may be that this will relieve the prisoner's family from looking for items that meet DOC's specifications because, of course, everything in the store will be authorized. But I think another very good benefit is that it's going to allow them, we're hoping, where they failed the last time, and that is accounting of the proceeds, that they are very much aware of that now and are drafting an RFP that is going to address not just the lease payments that they're going to be receiving, like a land lease for the premise lease for the physical structure, but they're going to try to get proceeds from the sales of items. And so I would just like to make an inquiry, possibly an amendment on page 3. So this is where it directs where the proceeds will be used, and it says 50% of the net proceeds to develop or enhance inmate welfare, the other 50% used at the discretion of the director. When they were at the public hearing, Major Anton Uggan, I thought, gave a more complex answer, and he said they would use the income for correctional activities like prison industries, inmate training, and other resources needed to take care of the inmates. But I like the idea that it would be going towards prison industries and inmate training, and I guess I would just ask legal if we're satisfied with this to develop or enhance inmate welfare. I'm not really sure if it's just, I don't want to run into problems of abuse of discretion. But at this, and then the other one, abuse of the discretion of the director, I guess at this point we're going to have to trust. But I hope that they were going to go to the activities. So I'm going to put on the record for legislative intent purposes that it will go to activities like prison industries and inmate training and preparing these inmates to be able to function outside of prison. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Terlai. Anyone else on the main motion? Senator Sabina Parrish, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just have a point of inquiry regarding if the contract, how is the contract going to be paid for? That's one question.
Senator Pito, the question is, how will the contract be paid for?
Actually, Madam Speaker, I mentioned from 1993 to 2015, they had legal problems with that. So what happened, we rectified the law so the contract can use one of the buildings at the Department of Correction. And I'm not sure what the previous speaker was talking about the things that she was saying regarding what contract are you saying, madam? All I can say is that we rectified that, with the problem, the legal process. So that has been initiated, and it's legal for the company to use one of the structures up at the Department of Correction.
Thank you, Senator Pito Terlai. Senator Paris, will that work for you?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So yeah, I'm just looking at the FISCO note that, so the vendor's going to pay for the operation of the commissary facility? Is that?
Yes.
That's correct. Okay. Thank you. So the other question is, would the author be open to including, as far as developing rules and regs through the AAA process and how it operates? Basically, maybe perhaps I would like to maybe create that language for this bill.
Senator, I'm going to take a moment's recess to consult with legal just to make sure that those rules and regs are not already in the process because of the program that has been existing in the past. Moment's recess. Jimenez 35 na legislature in Guam is back from recess. I understand that Senator Sabina Perez has an amendment that's being cleared through legal. I will go ahead and ask that and recognize the Vice Speaker Nelson to go ahead and speak on the main motion.
Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker, I just want to read from the testimony from the Deputy Director Joseph Carbalito in the committee report. He states, I just want to make a comment on that. I think it would be less of a burden to inspect a vendor as opposed to the amount of traffic that we currently have going in, as you know, with all the visitors and family members. So we would, of course, look into establishing an SOP to, of course, take care of that concern of the vendor. So the concern was putting in a standard operating procedure to inspect the products that the vendor would bring in, ensuring that there's no contraband within the packaging or within the items being sold at the commissary. And so I just wanted to proffer a point of inquiry to the sponsor of the bill and inquire if that standard operating procedures is in place now.
Senator Pito Terlahi, would you like to answer that question? Is there already policies in place based on the system that was there before?
Madam Speaker, if it has to do with a standard operating procedure in as far as checking the packets that are coming in, that has already been established. Remember that we have this since the year 1919, I believe,
93.
up to 19, I don't remember, but up to a certain, for so many years. And that standard operating procedure is going to continue being practiced. And in as far as checking the items that are coming in, it's been established already.
Sijos Masi, Senator Pito. Vice Speaker Nelson, will that suffice?
Just for the record, Madam Speaker, the standard operating procedures that are in place are for the visitations, right? So if I'm visiting a family member or a friend at
Anybody.
Department of Corrections, so we're looking at a standard operating procedure to address the vendor itself. And so hopefully that DOC will move forward. I stand in support of this bill. I do have an amendment for the bill. It reads on line 3, page 3. This is in the Section 3 Commissary Fund, subitem Bravo. Inmates improvement, the director may use up to 50% of net proceeds to the CCF to develop or enhance inmate welfare. The other 50% may be used at the discretion of the director. So what I am proposing, Madam Speaker, is that we cross out in line 3, may be used at the discretion of the director, and put shall be used for rehabilitation programs within Department of Corrections. Only because, Madam Speaker, we understand that there's a need for different types of rehabilitation programs within the Department of Corrections, and we want to reduce recidivism. And so in this amendment, we want to focus that the money is invested back into the inmates. So when they come up for parole or their release date, that money can be used to ensure that they are ready for the workforce, that they are confident and competent and contributing members of our community. And so we want to give them this help, this level up, to have an additional funding source. It's not a lot of money. I don't think that the commissary will make, but I think it's a good move in the direction that we want to really ensure that those who are inmates, we can help them, like to go to GCC to get their high school diploma or their GED. So these are just some of the things that the rehabilitation programs are in place. And I want to thank the social work team over at Department of Corrections for their great job and their continued advocating for the inmates. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Vice Speaker Nelson. On the Nelson Amendment, are there anyone wishing to speak? Senator Clinton Rigel, I will recognize you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just rise in full support of this amendment. I think this is a great amendment. We just had a public hearing on a number of bills where we heard testimony from a former inmate who spoke about how the key to his success, he spent about 5 years in jail, the key to his success was the rehabilitation that was offered. And specifically, he said it was rehabilitation that was offered while he was in the federal penitentiary, because he said there's really nothing like that being offered here at that level here on Guam. So to me, that's the key to success with reducing the prisoner population, with reducing crime, with reducing recidivism, is to put in place true rehabilitation programs so that, as the retiring speaker said, they have something to do when they get out of prison. They've got the skills needed to go get a job. They've got the counseling they needed to get them off of their addiction to drugs. They have the tools necessary to succeed. So I'm in full support of this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Rigel. Anyone else? If not, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Anyone else? Are you ready? Senator Perez, are you ready with the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I actually, just maybe a second more, but there's another area in the bill that I would like to offer an amendment. So on page 1, line 10, it says the director of DOC may operate or contract with another person to operate. So perhaps adding after person or entity to operate.
On that motion, on page 1, line 10, after the word person, to contract with another person or entity. Are there any objections? No objections? Hearing no objections, motion carries. Senator Perez, would you, I can move on.
Yeah, I just want to request a brief recess
Yeah,
for that to be distributed.
As the amendments are being looked at carefully by legal and then going to get circulated, anyone else wishing to speak on the main motion? If not, we will just take a moment's recess to get the copies of the amendment by Senator Perez. Y minuto 35 en la legislature in Guam is back from recess. Senator Sabina Perez, I will recognize you on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to offer an amendment. It's page 2, line 17 to 18, quote, Section E. Department of Corrections shall promulgate rules and regulations in compliance with the Administrative Adjudication Law of 5 GCA Chapter 9 for the administration of this Section 90.41 prior to the operation of an inmate commissary. So the reason being is, I think we all know that in government, when there's no rules and regs in place, it often leads us to, problems with how we manage things. And I think since this is a new program, it's good to get it started on the right foot in ensuring that these rules and regs are vetted and that it passes muster. The other part of this amendment is prior to the operation of an inmate commissary. So this doesn't hold up the RFP process, but we just want to make sure that prior to the operation that these rules and regs are in place. The other thing is if there is a potential way to expedite this too is through law, but at least this is, we're stating that this is, it has to go through a vetting process for this to occur. So it's just for the better of the government and the betterment of the functioning of this facility, which I offer this amendment to Masi.
Thank you, Senator Perez. On the Senator Sabina Perez amendment, anyone wishing to speak? If not, Senator Regine Biscoli, you recognize.
Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have a question for the proffer of this amendment.
Please state your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's my understanding that on page 3 of the bill, section 4 dictates the date of enactment. This act shall become effective upon enactment. If we are considering this amendment, what is the timeline that we're setting for the promulgation of rules and regulations in compliance with the administrative adjudication law?
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Perez.
So it's my understanding that if we're looking at the enactment of this bill, that it would include everything in its entirety. So that would include the production of these rules and regulations. So that's my interpretation of this, and as far as implementing it.
Senator Lee.
My apologies, Madam Speaker. If I could just request a brief 1-minute recess.
Y minuto 35 na legislatura in Guam is back from recess. Vice Speaker, I'm going to, 9.
So just Masi, Madam Speaker, I'd like to make a motion for us to recess till 0900 tomorrow morning. Thank you.
We are in recess till 9:30.
0900.
0900. Have a good evening, ladies and gentlemen.